tubers! Today I'm going to show you how to diagnose a malfunctioning tool gauge. Now we're not going to get into all kinds of fancy equipment and resistors of your choice and all kinds of confusing things. And then when things ain't going real good, you always got one of them. But I'm going to show you the KISS method. Now all you're going to need is digital ohm meter and a couple of test leads. Let's start with the basics here. This is called a fuel tank sending unit, for those of you who've never seen one. Down here is a fuel pump, which feeds fuel to the engine. This piece right here is the part that goes to your fuel gauge. It varies resistance to one circuit. It changes the fuel gauge depending on how much fuel would be in your tank. Now I'm going to set you up a little demo here. And basically, this is like your dimmer switch in your house. I have it hooked up to the current limited power supply to power this light here. Now in your house, as you turn the dimmer up and down, it changes the light in the room. Basically, this does the same thing, except for it's hooked to your fuel gauge. Now before we get to the vehicle for testing, I got to show you this. These are not all the same. Here's a little example for ohms. A full tank on my Chevrolet is 90 ohms. Ford, it's 10 ohms. Now you go to empty on the Chev, 10 and 70 on a Ford. They're backwards. They're not all the same. Now I've seen them almost up to 300 ohms. So before you start diagnosing your vehicle, you're going to have to find out the window that your rheostat should be in. To find the resistance for the vehicle's fuel tank sender that you're driving, look one up. A lot of times nowadays they have the actual value of that besides the manufacturer of the pump on a web page. Now the Ford truck has an intermittent problem, around a half a tank of fuel. And once again we're going to be looking at him, and it's got to be between 10 and 70 ohms for the fuel gauge to work properly. And if we're exceeding that, we're going to be looking at that guy there. Now the fuel gauge and the fuel tank sender have to be diagnosed separately. Now, somewhere on your vehicle there will be a connector you can take apart to test that one wire I was showing you. Some cars have a cover under the back seat you can take off to access, maybe in the trunk or underneath. A lot of them, vehicles, you'll find it on the cars inside on a kick panel here. And there's a connector you can pull apart for testing that wire that goes to that sending. On this particular vehicle, we got to go under the hood, like it will be on a lot of trucks. Now here we have two connectors that I've separated already. This one here goes to the fuel tank sender, the fuel pump, and the taillights. The other one here goes up to the gauges and would go to your gas gauge. I already know what color wire I have to hook onto. And the black wire is the one that goes to the sending unit. The green wire is the one that goes to the gauge. So let's get started on testing. It's hooked onto the one lead on the test meter. The other one we have going to a brake line right there for ground. And as you look at the ohm meter, 39 ohms. I know I'm around a half a tank of fuel, so fuel tank sender is okay, right? Now I replaced that fuel sending unit a couple months ago, and it appears good, right? Well, I told you we were going to do the KISS method here. Well, here's one I bet you never thought of. I'm grabbing onto the mirror of the truck right here. We're going to rock the truck forward and backwards so the fuel sloshes around in the tank. Let's watch the meter. Let's see what happens. Well, looky there. We're shooting way out of the range. So, on my intermittent fuel gauge problem, I bet we know now what we should be looking at. So, we now know the sending unit's bad, but I'm going to show you folks how to diagnose the fuel gauge too, seeing how we're into this. Let's go back under the hood, and remember that connector I split down? It goes to the front and the rear. Now, once again, the green wire is the one I have hooked on that connector there, which goes to the gas gauge in the cab. Now I'm going to leave that not connected to anything, and we're going to go in, turn the ignition on, and see what the gauge does. And as you can see, the gauge is just sitting there. Now remember when I showed you that thing with ohms, where some of the systems are opposite. So on some vehicles, with nothing connected, it'll go to full. Please be aware of that. Now we're going to go back here, and I'm going to ground out the gauge, which now should show where if we can get the full sweep of the gauge or not. So here we go. I'm going to ground it, and let's go see what it does. And oh yeah, it's in a hurry to get to the full mark. So we now know the gauge will work fully from empty to full. So the gauge should be okay. But like I say, I always start with the sending unit first, is the most common problem, but that's how you can check a gauge. And if you want to get real technical, which I promised I wouldn't do on the KISS method, but you can put, like on this, put a 40 ohm resistor between here. You should have half a tank of fuel. A little something, I guess, to add in case you're interested. You know, some of the viewers like to see the gadgets I create. This is one of them here. It's Fuel Caddy, for when you got to drop a fuel tank out of a vehicle. You can use the onboard pump to pump the tank empty, so it's really easy to work with when you drop it out to replace the sending unit or fuel pump. And you just switch the lines around on here and you can fill the tank back up. Now on this I have an onboard pump, which I can use and do use a lot for filling up gas cans and such. I actually got a video on that. You just throw the switch here. You can see the quick coupler there. And instead of using the pump on this guy today, I'm just pumping right off that one that's on board on the truck. Hey tubers, it's the next day. I didn't want to bore you with taking the tank out and replacing the sending unit. We're all set on that. I'm hooked back onto the replaced sending unit. We're going to test it right in the vehicle now. Rock it forward to backward here. You can see a meter is well within range the full time. And if yours stays within the range and you still suspect the sender, rock your vehicle side to side. That way you got the whole thing covered. If it's intermittent, it's gonna show. Anyway, I think we're done here, so let's move along. Hey tubers, thought I'd show you a neat little gadget a friend just gave me a little while back here. It's for locating a break in a wire, and I can see where this is really gonna come in handy for some stuff. Go down this wire here. You know, the brake should be right in that area. A little simulation here, but you get the idea. Another 2 thumbs up item. Yes, sir. Well, I'm sure you folks heard the word scan tool. Let me show you what you can do with one of these. Now, what we have here is waveform. What I do is I record a movie with a car in transit or just sitting in a stall if you're looking for an intermittent problem. Now this car here wasn't in there for that, but what I wanted to show you on this was, here is the fuel tank sending unit. Now if you want to, you can even expand the waveform out on this. The vehicle wasn't in there for this, but you can see how far the perimeters are on that and if it would be working properly. Now another thing you can do with the scan tool, you can go into a screen where you can access the fuel gauge itself. You can command it from 0 to 100% right from the scan tool, so you know if the gauge is working properly. Just another one of the little things in the arsenal here, thought you might get a kick out of, is seeing what I do during the day. Somewhere down the road too, maybe I'll put a simplified version of all the things the scan tool can do. If some of you people would maybe enjoy that. Anyway, thank you for stopping by. Hope this all helps you out and you enjoyed learning something new today. Take care. Bye-bye. Once in a while I'll still get an older car in to work on. I thought I'd give you folks a little tour of this one. It is a numbers matching car and has had a frame off restoration. It's just plain neat to see these older cars once again restored to showroom condition.